when you do a talk, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 40 minutes, or however long it is, the human mind can only process so much. But there's, at least for me, this tendency to want to over deliver. Do you do this yourself? Like, you're like, I gotta give so much value.
Yeah, of course.
I used to tell myself, if somebody paid $500 to attend a multi-day conference, it was my sole responsibility to deliver at least $500 of value, no matter what. And of course, that starts to stress you out, and you start putting so many things into your presentation that it just becomes overwhelming for people.
Yeah, of course. Everything you're saying is just, you know, echoing through my head like it's my own voice, because I do exactly the same thing. I think, well, this whole conference is riding on me kicking butt. And what a joke. And I really overdid it one time, and I learned my lesson. I tried to do too much. I did a presentation a few years ago at Icon, the illustration conference. I covered way too much ground, and I even ended it with a guitar song. And I also had a special guest, a friend of mine, come up and do a little comedy bit. And it was just all too much to organize, to keep straight. It became discombobulated, and I came off the stage and thought, that was just such a mess of stuff. And so since then, I've really focused on narrowing it down to maybe 2 or 3 things that I think these are the things I want them to walk away with. And I make sure and reiterate those things so that they're really, really clear. The other thing too is I remember being in the audience at a lot of these things, and like, I start to zone out when it's too much. But when somebody stays focused and they're really concise and they get off the stage when it's time, I'm remembering it more fondly. So I try and be that guy.
Yeah. It's a paradox of sorts. Like, we want to give value, so we try to put more in it, but by putting more in it, we confuse the audience, and it's so much for them to process, and their circuits get fried. And it's an instinct that we have to really fight, at least for me. I'm still struggling through this because my wife will be there. She's like, no matter how much time they give you, you'll always be jamming so much in there and rushing at the end. Can you just start editing things out? So in the last year, I think I've started doing a better job where I'll jam it with so much stuff, and about 2 days before, I'll just start deleting stuff, saying like, that's not necessary, that's a tangent, we don't really need that. And then I strip it down a little bit. It's still not great, but I'm working towards it.
I like that, what you said about right before starting to pull stuff out. I think that's sometimes what's needed, is a little time between when you've actually finished preparing it, and then you let it sit for a minute, you come back, it marinates, you come back to it and go, oh, this is redundant, this is redundant, this is redundant. And yeah, it's getting to the essence of it. I think John Cleese talked about that once with writing skits and sketches and just trimming the fat. And yeah, editing is always a huge part of the process that I sometimes overlook and need to spend more time with.
Yeah, I find that if I over prepare, it helps to quell my insecurities about this is not enough. And then moments before, by editing it out and saying, okay, really, this is what matters, and I think people are going to be good with this. I'd like to share something that my friend Joe Pilger told me one time. He said, we're always busy trying to give people our top shelf stuff, and so we're reaching, and it's a stretch for us, and it creates a lot of anxiety and stress. He says, just give them your middle or even your bottom shelf stuff, because even that people will just love and gobble up. And so that kind of put my mind at ease. I'm like, you're right. It's always like, I want to do the best job possible, be the best version of myself. This is the newest, greatest, latest thing. It causes so much stress for me. But I kind of hear those words echoing in my mind every time I start to stress out.
That's wisdom right there. You're calling to mind something. I had a conversation with somebody that was similar, where what they told me was, a lot of the things that I take for granted as obvious are news to a lot of people. And so I think that relates to what you're saying, where instead of me trying to find that amazing new thing that even I hadn't known or discovered yet, tell them what you already know that to you just is something that's become habit or whatever, and it could be a completely new piece of information or a new inspiring idea for them. I think that's really important too. That stuff matters. It's just that we sort of forget it because we've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I think it's a form of cognitive bias. It's the curse of knowledge, where you've learned it, you've figured it out, and then you forgot that there's one point in your life you didn't know this stuff. And then you don't want to teach it because it's like, duh, doesn't everybody know this? And it turns out, no, not really.